Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to speak in strong support of H.R. 3675, my Western Water Accelerated Revenue Repayment Act. My bill grants authority that will allow agriculture and municipal water users to prepay what they owe the federal government. This prepayment will generate hundreds of millions for new water infrastructure and water storage, generate early revenue for the Treasury, and decrease federal paperwork requirements and operating costs for water users. Without this authority, the vast majority of irrigation districts do not have the ability to make an early repayment to the Treasury. This is like telling a homeowner who has a 30-year mortgage that they cannot make early payments to pay it off early, or like telling someone with a 5-year car loan that they cannot pay it off early and must wait the full 5 years. As long as a repayment obligation exists, federal strings and government red tape exists, including burdensome paperwork requirements and limitations on how much acreage a farmer is allowed to plant. When the authority was authorized previously, it was a huge success, with 86 contractors deciding to prepay what they owed the federal government, generating $344 million for the water storage account. As the bipartisan National Water Resources Association stated in a letter in support of my bill, quote, "This added tool will assist water systems in managing their operations in the most effective and efficient way possible at a time of rising costs and higher interest rates," end quote. Permanently extending this authority simply gives water users a voluntary option as participation and is not mandatory. Current Deputy Commissioner of the Bureau of Reclamation, Michael Brain, testified, quote, "H.R. 3675 would allow for contractors' repayment to be expedited, allowing for funding to more quickly be returned to the Treasury and provide additional flexibility for Reclamation's water users and contract holders. The department looks forward to working with the bill sponsor and subcommittee to address technical edits," end quote. I have worked closely with the Bureau of Reclamation in drafting this bill and have incorporated 2 rounds of technical assistance. I urge adoption of this common sense bill, and this bill will benefit water users and agriculture throughout the country. Mr. Chairman, I yield back. Thank you, Mr. Carl. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I would urge adoption of this legislation, and if my colleagues on the other side of the aisle care about the impacts of drought, certainly, I would hope that you would join me in supporting this legislation as it increases water storage. I would like to speak to a few of the things that the gentlewoman had mentioned. I love to hear that my colleagues on the other side of the aisle are all of a sudden worried about the taxpayers. I would like to remind them that last Congress, under one-party rule, this body forced the American taxpayers to spend trillions of dollars we don't have. This reckless spending unleashed record inflation on Americans that has declined our bank and retirement accounts, increased gas prices to record levels, raised utility bills, drove up grocery costs, and made it harder to live for my constituents in Colorado. The primary root cause of this record-breaking inflation was trillions of dollars of wasteful federal spending. We are now over $32 trillion in debt. My bill does none of this and actually generates early revenue for the Treasury. When originally authorized, this program was very successful, with 86 contractors deciding to prepay what they owe the federal government, generating $344 million for the water storage account. This means hundreds of millions of dollars were generated for new water infrastructure and water storage projects, which are vital to combat drought in the West while decreasing federal paperwork requirements and operating costs for water users, many of whom support this legislation. When this provision was enacted under the WIN Act, CBO projected that this provision would expedite payments and generate $639 million in receipts for the Treasury from repayment over the fiscal year 2015 to fiscal year 2024 period. So CBO said it was proven that this authority is actually good for taxpayers. And I would like to also revisit something the gentlelady had brought up with the WIN Act and providing a one-size-fits-all approach. Permanently extending this authority simply gives water users a voluntary option, as participation is not mandatory. It is not a one-size-fits-all, and this is an option water and municipal users wanted that was driven from the bottom up and was authorized previously with strong bipartisan support. It doesn't remove any congressional oversight. In fact, it reinstates Congress's authority over this program and these repayments. And the gentlewoman had also argued that it provides subsidies to agriculture. Again, under federal law, the beneficiaries of reclamation, water storage, and delivery projects must repay all infrastructure costs under the federal government. Beneficiaries pay principal. This bill provides no subsidies, and they must repay all costs. So the argument there is false, and it's an attack on agriculture. And finally, there are no subsidies in this bill. The bill does not change the amount of water that water users are authorized to use after they have repaid what they owe the federal government for water infrastructure. This shouldn't be a controversial bill. It allows simply for water users to repay the terms of their loan early, as you would pay off a home if you had the money to do so. And again, I urge adoption of my bill, and I thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.